A lot of old school strength coaches will tell you that if you want a strong deadlift, you need to train the deadlift hard and heavy. That's why most of the intermediate strength programs out there have you deadlift once a week for relatively low volumes, and everything is just hard and close to failure. You might notice that a lot of the programs have you start with like a 5x5, then once you stall, you drop to a 3x5, then a 2x5, because you just need to get more and more weight on the bar and train at higher intensities. This approach is completely broken. Once I stopped listening to this advice, I got to a 661 pound deadlift or 300 kilos, and I only changed one major thing in my training. In this video, I'm going to share that thing with you so that you can just copy me and you can go and get even stronger than me at the deadlift. And if you want me to personally coach you, I've coached over 500 guys to build a really strong deadlift, including 700 pound pullers. Top link in the description, you can hire me as your personal strength coach. So let's get straight into it. Your current approach to deadlifting is broken if you're following those generic intermediate approaches, right? So most of those approaches are going to have you deadlift once a week, rarely twice a week, it's usually once. It's going to be relatively low volume. So like I said, you'll go from a 5x5 to a 3x5 to a 2x5. And the approach is just add 5 pounds each week. You go through a training block and you just add weight, add weight, add weight until you hit a wall, failing reps. You start the process over and then you're supposed to build back up and do it again. Problem is, it doesn't really work. You don't get any stronger. Sure, you might have this really rare day once every 3 or 6 months where you feel really strong, but then you can't really recapture that on a consistent basis. Sometimes you might even be failing reps that you've previously hit with ease. And everything is hard and heavy. You do a lot of slow, grindy sets near failure. You probably feel quite tired, beat up and fatigued a lot of the time, and your lower back is in pieces. And the biggest downfall of these programs is that it's very unpredictable. Your strength is never really going up on a consistent basis. You never really know where your 1 rep max is because, like I said, it fluctuates up and down so much because of the hard training fatigue. It isn't really working, and I would highly recommend that you get off this approach as soon as possible. So let me tell you exactly what I changed in my deadlift programming to take me from those intermediate numbers like 405, 455, that kind of range, all the way up to 661 pounds, and I have more in the tank and was getting close to 700 pounds. So the one drastic thing that I changed in my deadlift programming was 0 sets to failure ever. No sets to failure on the deadlift. I significantly reduced the intensity of my deadlifting. That is by far the biggest, most influential change I made in my deadlift programming. So to put that in perspective, the first ever time that I deadlifted 300 kilos, 661 pounds, my training block, week 1, I did 220 kilos for a double. Then I went 220, 230, 240, 250 kilos. Then I jumped up to 300 kilos and I have more in the tank. I was actually shocked by how easy it moved. I made a 50 kilo jump in that final week, which shows you don't have to be lifting close to your max to get stronger. I would recommend that you do a bit closer than what I was, but it kind of reaffirms that point that you don't need to be lifting super heavy to get strong. Secondly, my back off work or my volume work was at 405 for that entire block. Now, to put that into perspective, 405 is a weight that I could probably rep for 25, 30 plus reps, and I was doing it for sets of 4. And I still got stronger and increased my 1 rep max. Now, a lot of you are going to hear that and think, what's the point? That's way too light, etc. But my question back to you, if doing 405 for sets of 4 increased my 1 rep max, was it too light? What do we mean by too light? It got me stronger, right? So therefore it was appropriately heavy or light to get me strong. And a lot of guys get caught up in this mindset of heavy equals better. It doesn't. It just doesn't. Like, we need to view our training volume as stress. Lifting weights is just stress. We apply a stress, we recover from the stress, adaptations happen, and then you're able to lift more weight. Now, if I can get stronger doing my volume work at 405, why would I do my volume work at 500? It's no more stimulus, it's just coming with more fatigue. So let me explain the process and tell you how I actually set that training up to get to that 661 pull, and this is how I would recommend that you do it as well. So you're watching this video, I would recommend that you deadlift 2 times a week. The way I would set that up, I would have a primary deadlift day, and what I mean by primary is that it's just your main deadlift. It's done with your strongest stance, so maybe it's a conventional or it's a sumo deadlift. I would recommend that you do a top set. So you do 1 to 2 reps. You could do 3, but just for this example, I'm going to say 1 to 2 reps at 80% and above, okay? That is your heavy set for the day. It's the benchmark set that we're going to lift heavier weights on, and we're going to try and add weight to every single week. The main difference here, I recommend that you do your volume work 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps in the 60 to 75% range. Now that's going to sound quite easy and quite light, and it is light, and it's going to have you leaving 5+ reps in the tank, maybe even 10+. But like I said, we don't care how light it is, we don't care what the weight is on the bar, we care if it gets you stronger. If it gets you stronger, it is an appropriate dose of stress. You do not need to bring your ego into this and say, but oh, I need to do my volume work at this particular number. No, you don't. Your body does not care what weight is on that bar. It cares how much stress is imparted by that intensity, okay? Now, you do that deadlift primary day once a week, sorry. Then we're going to do a secondary deadlift. For the secondary deadlift, I want you to choose a variation that is suitable for you and targets a weak point, okay? So I'm going to give you a few examples. So if you are new to twice a week deadlifting, I would recommend that you choose a Romanian deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift. If you are comfortable deadlifting twice per week, I would recommend that you choose one of the following. A pause deadlift if your positioning off the floor is not great. A deficit deadlift if you feel like you really struggle with your speed off the floor, you're quite slow off the floor. Or a deadlift with a band, a resistance band over the center of the bar if you feel like your lockout is poor. Now, I don't think bands and chains and stuff like that are unique. I have just personally seen very good results with bands because the band gives me a tactile cue. What I mean by that is as the band stretches out, the lift starts to feel a bit more challenging as you get close to lockout. Because of that, it just cues me mentally when I feel the band start pulling to pull harder and to pull faster, okay? It's just a bit of a feedback loop kind of thing. You feel the band pull, so you start pulling the weight harder, okay? So if your start positioning is poor, do a pulse deadlift. If you are weak off the floor, do a deficit deadlift. If you are weaker at lockout, do a deadlift with a mini band, okay? Now, for this secondary day, I recommend again that you do a top set, but this time 3 to 5 reps at about 75 or 78% and above, okay, of your 1 rep max. Again, volume work, 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 6 reps at 60 to 75% of your 1 rep max, okay? Very important that if you are following this setup, there needs to be a difference in weight between these 2 days. Do not try and lift really heavy on both. The primary is the heavy one, push this one harder. The secondary, pull back a little bit. You might want to have like a 20 kilo gap between these, so about 45 pounds or more, okay, so they don't bleed into one. So do these twice per week. I want you to focus on adding weight to that top set every single week. Maybe you try and add 10 kilos per week to the primary, or 20 pounds. To the secondary, maybe you add 10 pounds or 5 kilos, okay, so half of the speed of the primary day. The back off sets, feel free to keep those at the same weight. If they are working and you are getting stronger, don't just add weight just because you feel like progressive overload or whatever. Remember what I said to you before, the back off sets are just stress. Your body does not care what weight is on the bar, it cares how much stress it experiences from those back off sets. If the top set is going up, let's say you're doing your back off work at 315, the top sets are going up week to week, just leave it at 315. If you are unable to add weight to the bar at the target RPE on those top sets, and those back offs are feeling really, really easy, so they're moving like an empty bar, maybe add 5 or 10 pounds, so go up to 320 or 325 and then see what happens to the top set, okay? I want you to focus on bar speed, so I want you to focus on moving the bar as fast as possible on those back off sets. Just because it's light, don't move it lazily and don't move it slowly. I want you to focus on as fast bar speed as possible, okay? So this setup is going to result in you being able to deadlift more often, with more volume, at higher qualities, and you're not going to feel so beat up, fatigued, and sore compared to those approaches you're doing right now. Like, just compare the 2 examples. Your current approach, 2 sets of deadlifts, 2 sets of 5, really hard, versus my proposed setup, you might be able to do 8 sets total of deadlifts per week. So you've just made a drastic increase to the amount of deadlifting you're doing, but it probably feels similar in terms of stress because the intensity is so much lower, okay? So pro tip then to finish out this block, one thing I can tell you is pacing is very, very important. What do I mean by pacing? It basically means the weights that you select to put on the bar each week. Too many of you are starting out the block way too heavy, so on week 1 you'll come right out the gates and try and lift as heavy as possible. Then you try and add weight to that each week, and you can't because the starting point was too heavy. What I recommend that you do instead, have a target weight for the end of your block. So let's say you want to pull 405, and then work backwards to find your week 1 number. So if you want to hit 405 on the final week of the block, maybe you go 395, 385, 375, 365, and then you work your way up like that. I would actually recommend bigger jumps, like 20-pound jumps. So maybe you go 405, 385, 365, 345, and so on, okay? You want to give yourself room to build momentum and to actually get weight on the bar, rather than starting too heavy, gassing out by week 2 or 3, and then you have to go back, build up again, take a deload or something like that, okay? And like I said previously, make sure there is a gap between your primary deadlift and your secondary. Otherwise, they're just going to bleed together and you're essentially doing a heavy primary deadlift 2 times a week. So I'd recommend keeping at least 20 kilos between those 2 deadlift days, okay? If you're deadlifting on like a Tuesday and a Friday, for example. So thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it helps you to improve your deadlift strength. If you want a free program to run, go ahead and steal my intermediate one. I promise that will get you stronger on the deadlift compared to doing a 3x5 or a 2x5. If you have any questions or comments on the deadlift, post them in the comment section down below. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video.